Once upon a time in the sleepy little hamlet of Mendon, there was a problem with the town's drinking water supply. Now, in order for you to understand the size and magnitude of the problem, you need to have a little bit of background. For the few in here who may not know where Mendon is, that's on the west side of Cache Valley, nestled at the base of the Mendon Mountains. Tom, that's for your benefit. Okay. Now, it depends on which end of the mountains you're on as to whether it's the Wellsville Mountains or the Mendon Mountains, but since I'm the one standing here, it's the Mendon Mountains today. Population in Mendon is about 1,200 if we count some of the surrounding area that's serviced by our water system. Our water hookups are 416. That includes one elementary school, 2 church houses, a nursery, a dairy, and two feed yards, along with all the residences. One of the good things that happened back in the mid-'70s that I think was some good forward thinking for the people at that time is that most of the town, working with the agriculture community, came together to put in a number of private pressurized irrigation systems. And so approximately 48 or 85% of the homes in Mendon have access to pressurized secondary water, which has been a real benefit to us. To understand our culinary water system, it's comprised of 2 water sources. One that's known as the Deep Canyon Spring. That's an 1865 water filing that gave to the town 1 second foot of water. The spring typically flows an average of 450 gallons per minute. But an interesting note is that this is shared with the Mendon North Irrigation Company, who has a prior filing dating to 1860 for 2 second feet of water. So if you do the math there a little bit, you can understand that there's a little bit of prioritization that has to take place. In about 1982, Mendon also purchased what was known as the cobblestone well, drilled at a depth of 147 feet. The water right that came with that entitled us to pump 1.5 second feet or 675 gallons per minute, of which most of the time when we've used the well, we've pumped between 375 and 400 gallons per minute. It is, if you look at all the well logs in that surrounding area, is an anomaly. It's one of the few wells that produces this volume of water. On average, most of the wells in that area are somewhere between 10 and maybe 20 gallons per minute. Okay, so we've benefited from that. One note, though, is that there are a higher level of dissolved solids in the water, so the taste is not quite as enjoyable as the mountain spring water. And so there are some residents in town who assure us that they can tell the very day that we turn the cobblestone well on into the city's water system. Now, I've tested that a few times on some of those people, and I find that they're off by a few weeks, but it's pretty close. Things are not always peaceful. We do have a few challenges over in Mendon. The current general plan says that we would like to maintain our agricultural heritage, our rural atmosphere, and our lifestyle. And yet, like many towns here in Cache Valley, we've experienced growth over the last 10 years. In this case, about 2% per year. That's made for some interesting discussions as we try to balance the agricultural water needs along with the culinary water needs for the residents. And a lot of discussions in trying to help many of the newer people that have moved in understand what a water share represents. It does not mean that you can turn your sprinkler on the 1st of May and not turn it off until the end of September. Okay, and so there's been some frustration with trying to balance the needs of both communities. Now, I need to share my bias at this point, and that is that I'm a 5th generation farmer and rancher here in Cache Valley. My ancestors came to the Mendon area back in the early 1800s, or 1880s, and so that's near and dear to my heart, and one of the reasons that I ran to be on the city council, because at the time there was nobody who was familiar with agriculture and some of their needs, and so I was concerned over some of the decisions that were being made. And so one of the things that I've pushed for and tried very hard is to help the council and the residents understand the importance of of maintaining this balance between our agricultural interests and the city's needs. We are not blessed like our friends and neighbors over here on the east side with a large watershed behind us. And so our water resources are extremely, and as we often moan about, there have been no CEOs of any large companies who have felt the need to come and establish their headquarters in Mendon or bring any large retail outlets to our area, and so our revenue sources are pretty limited as well. Okay, so you can see that we do have a few challenges. Now, the heart of our story gets interesting and intensifies around the year 1999, which is when we completed a water master plan. And it basically pointed out that within the near future we needed to develop some additional water storage, and beyond that, in a few years, additional water if we were going to continue to grow. Everybody thought that's good, that's important, we need to pay attention to that. But pretty much the master plan went and sat on the shelf. And around 2003, after having, I believe it was the fourth year of a below normal precip, we began to notice that our spring flow that we were relying almost solely on began to diminish significantly. There was renewed interest in we need to be considering looking at some additional water, and at that point began to utilize our cobblestone well a lot more heavily. Okay. Also in 2003, you'll recall, if I'm not mistaken, that there was some new legislation that passed, and we started adding words to our vocabulary like forfeiture and potential haircuts was the terminology used. And so we were a little bit concerned in moving forward with making requests for additional water that the state would look very closely at previous water usage and say, hey, wait a minute, maybe you're not operating things correctly. And so for a period of time through 2004 forward, we did a well study, updated our master plan, which basically told us that instead of storage, we really needed to look at an additional water source. I introduced to the council a new water policy that basically said that knowing in the future if we were to develop additional groundwater sources, that in Cache Valley we would need to be able to exchange some surface rights for those ground rights. And so in that water policy, anytime anybody chose to subdivide, they needed to provide to the city a half-acre foot of water. The second part of that policy also required that anybody subdividing needed to provide secondary water to the lots that they were developing. That did not come to the city. It went directly assigned to those lots. Okay, now I'm sure this never happens in any other communities in Cache Valley, but in Mendon prior to this time, as people would develop, those landowners would typically hold back a portion, in some cases all the water shares, allow the land to be developed, and then rely on the city to provide the culinary water for both the outdoor and indoor use. And so this water policy grumbled about a bit at first, but most people have come around to see that this is probably where we needed to go. Okay? And then we introduced a new pricing structure, which up until then had not changed for 10 years. And as we looked at our pricing at that point, we were being extremely generous in how we had valued water. And so, wanting to encourage conservation, we increased our overage rates significantly. In 2009, we had in August of that year, a water test that came back that indicated that the nitrate levels in our cobblestone well, which at this point we were relying heavily on to keep us afloat, were high in nitrates. We immediately took a second test to determine if it was accurate, and it supported what the original findings were, that we had exceeded the state standard for nitrates. At that point, we notified the state of Utah, said we were taking the well offline, immediately informed the citizenry that there would be no more outdoor watering until possibly the following year. And so that got people's attention. In 2010, well, let me back up a little bit. Through 2009, in that fall, that was a very educational experience. We, prior to that time, had never worked with the Drinking Water Board. We had never worked with the Division of Drinking Water significantly, learned what change applications were with the State Division of Water Rights. We have never used a bond attorney previous to that, and so there was a whole myriad of hoops and hurdles that we had to jump through to be able to secure funding and the resources necessary to pursue putting a well in. We had, with our raising of our water rates in 2004, been able to build up some water reserves to help us with the project, but costs had far and away exceeded what we had been able to save up. Okay, so in 2010, that spring, we began construction on an 8-inch well. Once again, had to change our price structure to reflect the additional cost that we hadn't anticipated, and implemented a new water usage sign. So as you drive into Mendon from one of 3 directions, you'll see a Culinary water use sign poster there, and if it's green, you can continue to water indoor and outdoor. If you see yellow, then you can continue to use water indoors, but you needed to restrict your use to only critical landscape outside. And if it's red, and that's happened a couple of times, it's only limited to indoor use. In 2011, earlier this spring, we had found water. We were fairly confident that identified a water source, and we sent in our water samples. Now, at this point, we would hope for a happy ending. Okay, but let me tell you the reality. The pumping tests, which we had initially thought were somewhere in the ballpark or would yield about 600 gallons per minute, suddenly dropped to 100 gallons per minute, then down to 50, and then down to 25 gallons per minute. We're kind of shocked. We couldn't understand why these things were occurring. We thought, all right, well, 25 gallons per minute is not what we'd hoped for. We were hoping for at least 300 gallons per minute, but we'll take whatever we can get that at least helps some. So we sent in our water samples, and lo and behold, the water samples that came back last week indicate elevated levels in arsenic. After several $100,000, we no longer have a water source. So I'm kind of the most sought-after fellow in Mendon right now, and not for positive reasons. Some of the people are panicking, afraid that we're near the end. We have now gone to Plan B, which we hope is getting permission to pump water and treat it from Cutler Reservoir, but to keep costs down, going with a hand pump. And you'll notice that the City Council, because of their brilliant decision-making abilities, are the ones listed as the ones who will perform the labor for the hand pumping aspect. And all the time repeating Teddy Roosevelt's famous quote, "Better it is to have dared mighty things, to win glorious triumphs, even though checkered by failure, than to rank with those poor spirits who neither enjoy nor suffer much because they have lived in the gray twilight that knows neither victory nor defeat." Now, being on the end of defeat, I've decided that the gray twilight may not be quite as bad a place to be at. We're to the point of the whys, okay? Many people are asking, why did the city drill so deep and increase the costs of the well we were at? It was very important, again, coming from my agricultural background, but also the city, the council, and citizens felt that it was important that we did not impact any of the existing water sources in Mendon. There are a number of small springs, and we wanted to make sure that we were down at a deep enough level that we wouldn't impact any of these appropriated rights. Because again, those springs and those irrigation systems are what provide the 85% pressurized water to the citizens there. So if we impact those, we've gained nothing, because then they have to use our culinary system to water outdoors. Why not just take over the rest of the Deep Canyon Spring? I explained to you that that's split with the North Irrigation Company. Right now it's on about a 50-50% split, and so there are many citizens that are saying, well, just take the rest of the water from them. My response to that has been, number one, that rewards those people who have chosen to develop here over the last few years. Okay, they basically have utilized the remaining water that we had available, and those who have chosen to stay in agriculture or to hold on to their property are the ones that would be out, so to speak, in being able to do what they chose to do with their land. Secondly, okay, we take that water from the irrigators, we build another 30, 40, 50 houses, however much it is, then what do we do? You know, we really haven't solved the problem that's facing the city. And so we have not chosen to pursue that avenue. Okay, the big one right now that keeps coming home is, why didn't you drill a test hole first? The quotes that we received for drilling a test hole that would provide us the information we needed in the location we were at were around $125,000. The well that we estimated to drill was around $210, $220. So almost 2/3 of the cost of drilling the production well would have gone, would have been spent in doing a test hole. And so the decision at that time was, no, let's just go with an 8-inch production size hole. Do I wish I could make that decision over again? Probably so, now that we're on this end of it. But at the time, we were pretty confident in what we had. Finally, several have asked, well, why not mix or treat the cobblestone well water? The cost of being able to do that, we've been told, are going to range somewhere in the neighborhood of $600,000 to $900,000 to do either one of those options. And so drilling a well and trying to find an additional water source appeared to be the best option. The final chapter hasn't been written. At this point, we've regrouped. We're restudying our options. We're talking about maybe coming over to Tom's house and seeing if he'll share some of his water. Only kidding, Tom. But we are trying to come up with an additional avenue or way to be able to solve our problem. With that, that's your bedtime story. I hope most of you are comfortable and relaxed. Eminent domain. Just the city needs it. We're in a crisis mode. Go take it. The Deep Canyon spring that Mendon North irrigates with, most of that land sits higher above the Wellsville-Mendon Canal and any of the other spring sources, and so it would require pumping water back up pretty substantially to irrigate those acres. So as far as doing some kind of a trade, possibly, but the argument comes, who's going to pay for the pumping costs and so forth? Is the city responsible? Well, but it's pretty tough from an agricultural standpoint, to exchange a gravity flow water system for here we're going to pay for pumping costs to irrigate the same land. So from an agriculture or the irrigator's perspective, they're not supportive of that. Okay, I do need to say a thank you for the many people that have been involved in this. Dr. Robert Oakes is here. He has helped us to try to determine a lot of the geology. We're in a unique situation over there on the end of the mountain there, and so it's been good to have his input. And there's many others that have helped us at both the state and local level. Okay, thank you.